This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here. I sort of consider Cornell to be, one of the pillars, one of the origins of horticulture in the United States. So it's wonderful to be here. And this is kind of an interesting anomaly. I don't give a lot of talks about teaching. Not that I don't like to give talks about teaching. It's just that most of the time, we research scientists aren't invited to talk about our teaching stuff. We're invited to talk about our research stuff. And so I'm going to blaze through some of the various things that I'm working on. And so I'm basically going to be, I'll give you a little background about myself. Neil just gave quite a bit of it already, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my research and my extension work. And then talk a little bit about our teaching programs at UC Davis that relate to the plant sciences and relating to what I'm presenting here. And then with that context, I will dive into talking about the course that I've come to talk to you about. So some of this you just learned, but the core is that I have a number of different things going on, and the first half of my career was focused pretty much on ornamentals, and now I'm focused more widely. This book on the market, Soilless Culture, is one that Michael Raviv and I put together, and it's sort of the definitive guide in the field of hydroponics. And if you look really, really carefully, this guy in the red shirt right there is that guy right there. Do you remember this spot in Colombia?
Yeah, I was going to say it had to be Colombia.
Yeah. Anyway, so.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that all.
Yeah, you're a cover girl kind of thing, Anyway, so I have research and instruction as part of my makeup for my position at UC Davis. It's 25% for instruction and research, and I have a big chunk agricultural experiment station, and then a pretty big chunk for cooperative extension. So I actually am a specialist and connect with the advisors in the field. And so over the years, I've done quite a bit of work with greenhouses and with nurseries. And in the last few years, I've also started looking at indoor production. People used to talk to me about indoor production as to whether that might be a reasonable thing to do, and I told them that was nonsense. People would talk to me about vertical production, and I'd say, that's nonsense. Don't go there. It makes no sense. And of course, now I'm aiming directly into that direction and will be doing a lot of things in that field because actually some interesting things have happened. And so I've got I'm just going to blast a few screens here of some of the work that I've been working on. We've been doing a couple of things with lettuce, looking at various facets. I've done some work with strawberries. Each time I work with strawberries, I swear I will never work with strawberries again. And there's too much political baggage and all this stuff. But anyway, we had this project where we were looking at root zone temperatures on strawberries, and still looking at orchids. In fact, for the early part of my career, I did a lot of work with cut flower roses. And I've always wanted to work on orchids, but I could never get any money to do that work. And so I ended up finally doing some work with orchids, but largely from the standpoint of trying to see if we can grow potted orchids hydroponically, which of course is a completely oxymoronic thing because our education to our students about orchids is don't water them more than once a week because you will kill them. And indeed, if you're going to try to do orchids hydroponically, you will kill a lot of orchids. But it is possible. And I bet you'd like me to tell you the secret of that, wouldn't you? I've also been working on a photovoltaic shade house. This is a nursery structure. In California, every outdoor nursery has a screen house, maybe even several screen houses at different levels of shading. And I decided that it would make good sense to do one that, instead of throwing the sunlight away, make it into electricity. So this house, I have one section that makes takes 70% of the intercepted light, makes electricity. 30% of sunlight goes through the plants, and another section where it's roughly reversed. I get about 35% shading, and that makes electricity, and then the other portion, the plants get the sunlight. And so this is my photovoltaic shade house, and if you ever want to come to Davis and visit, you should probably sign up to visit that. You would not be the only one visiting that. I have also become a tour guide, and once a week at least I give a tour of the shade house to whoever wants to come see it. And so it's a very catchy, very eye-catching thing, and actually you're going to see in a minute that I'm going to make it even more eye-catching. This is the structure. It's actually one of the largest things I've ever built at UC Davis. It's the only thing that I've ever had to do a research project where I had to buy a power pole. It's a kind of an interesting thing, but I needed to connect my photovoltaic production to the grid so that the electricity could go somewhere, because I had no other use for the electricity myself. As you may be aware, in container nursery production, you really don't have a lot of use for electricity. You need a little bit to run the timers and maybe some pumps for irrigation, but beyond that, we don't use it. So that also spurred in my mind a number of ideas about the fact that, well, if you have this kind of a thing and you have the electricity right there, then there are some other things you can do with that. So I've actually installed some screen compartments in there with the idea of actually doing some cooling in those screen compartments because I have electricity to do that with. And right now I'm also doing a lot of work with plant production lighting, looking at supplemental lighting in a variety of ways, photoperiodic lighting, and particularly looking at the new technologies that are coming on the market right now and have been coming on the market. I'm particularly fascinated with LED lighting because I can get monochromatic lighting or sort of monochromatic lighting. And suddenly we are starting to see things that we've never seen before in horticulture in terms of what we can do with that information. So LED lighting, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, stands for light emitting diodes. These are now, almost everywhere you can see them. And the key facet to them is that the prices have been coming down on them. They were initially touted as being more energy efficient than light bulbs, than other kinds of light sources, but this was kind of a myth. But one of the big facets to LED lighting is that we can actually construct a spectrum that we want to deliver to the plants, so that we can leave out things that the plants technically don't need, or we think that the plants might not need. So we can make a lamp that makes absolutely no green light. We can make a lamp that makes no infrared light, and and because we have sort of a unique situation with this device in that all the light comes off one side of the device and heat goes off both the back and the front, you can actually take the heat off the back and you can channel that heat away without obstructing the light itself. And you cannot do that with conventional light bulbs. And when you see people in growth environments where they have growth rooms with HID lamps, generally there's a big effort to try to get all that heat channeled off so it doesn't get down to your plants. With LED lights, you can hold your hand under the LED light, you will not feel any warmth from the lamp. So that's a kind of a unique feature, and there are actually some other unique features that LED lamps also have. And so this is one of the things that I'm particularly focused on trying to look at. Initially, this technology has been focused primarily on replacing HID lamps. I think that's actually a mistake. I think the HID lamps are great. They do a great job in the greenhouse. And if you hang LED lamps in their place, thinking that you're going to replace the HID lamps, you're going to have to do some very special engineering to get the money back, because right now those are much, much more expensive, and the return on investment is significantly lower. But if you do it a certain way and you can structure it so it's very plant-centric, then you will have lower energy usage, and you are then able to do some things that you can't do with HID lamps, such as switching them on and off very fast. And right now, if you try to switch an HID lamp on and off, well, once you switch it off, you're going to wait 15 minutes for it to come back fully on. And in fact, you'll wear out the lamp really fast if you switch it on and off. Well, solid-state lighting doesn't work that way. You can switch it on and off very rapidly, especially if it's designed that way. So I've got a number of different things that I'm looking at there, and one of the things is looking at whether we can use lighting to control various things on plants. In this case, we are orchids, and we're looking at the spike length on orchids. And we really see a very dramatic difference between orchids growing under blue light and orchids growing under red light, with the red light being much more favorable to spike elongation. On the other hand, I'm figuring that we can use the blue light to keep plants short, but I haven't found a way yet to do that in a reliable fashion. Currently, I'm building a plant growth facility, which is an indoor plant growing facility, and you can see we're actually building it outdoors. It's sitting right next to my shade house, my photovoltaic array. This is what it looks like today. It's actually now completed from the outside, and right now we're building the inside, and it has 8 layers of production inside it. And we're now no longer talking about 2-dimensional production in a greenhouse environment, but 3-dimensional production. And so it's very much a vertical production situation. And indeed, it consumes a lot of electricity, but I have yet to consume all the electricity that I'm producing on my PV. So if anybody wants to argue with me about CO2 footprint, I am yet taking CO2 and making it into biomass, not the other way around. So right now this is gearing up, and I hope to have about 300 some shelf space areas to work on. So anyway, that's kind of my overview of my research, and that's all I'm going to say right now. But if you ask me about some of my research projects later on, I'm obviously happy to talk about them. But my mission here today is to talk about some teaching things, and in particular, I want to do that in the context of how we do undergraduate and graduate education at UC Davis. We do have a plant sciences program, and plant sciences at UC Davis is the merging of 4 different departments. We actually should have merged 5 departments, but one of them, they had too much money and too much good stuff. They didn't want to dilute that by sharing that with environmental horticulture. And the other 3 departments, veg crops, agronomy and range science, and pomology, they agreed that we should form one team. And in fact, it was driven by teaching. We realized that our weakness at UC Davis was our undergraduate teaching in the plant sciences. And this is despite the fact that we know that we are the #1 plant biology undergraduate teaching program in the country. Okay. So in our mind, you might think this can't possibly be, but in our mind, the plant sciences part was defective, while the plant biology was, nationally #1. And we figured that in order to get our plant sciences teaching up to that level, we had to make a change. And that change motivated us to unite into one program. So today we have programs that range from molecular, genomics, genetics, all the way up to ecology. We certainly do physiology and biology. And in horticulture, we certainly have a lot of production horticulture, but also landscape and urban horticulture. The undergraduate majors that we have one called environmental horticulture and urban forestry. This is basically ornamental horticulture with a name that nobody can find in the catalog. But enough students keep finding it year after year, where it's a sustained major with about 40 students in it at any one point in time, and we decided that we would not take it apart and merge it into something else. We have started a plant sciences undergraduate major. Some of you might remember that UC Davis used to have a plant sciences undergraduate major back in the 1980s and 1990s. And, well, we disassembled that because we thought that we didn't need to do that anymore. And then, but then now that we're a plant sciences department, we've put that teaching back on the books. We have related majors. We have an undergraduate major in plant biology. We have a biotechnology major that has 3 components, with plants being one of those. We have sustainable agriculture as a brand new major. And then on the graduate program side, we have the horticulture and agronomy graduate group. So that's actually where I take most of my graduate students. We have a plant biology graduate group, which is actually where Neil got his PhD. We also have an ecology graduate program and a genetics graduate program, and those all have PhD programs as part of them.
Heiner, roughly how many students are in the undergraduate plant science and the 3 other concentrations?
The plant sciences, I believe, is right now in the 20s, 30s, something like that, growing, because it started brand new. It didn't have any track record, and now it's accumulating students. The sustainable agriculture is about the same size and also growing. The biotech is in the hundreds, and the plant side of that is actually not the biggest chunk of that. So, but there are typically somewhere between 50 and 70 students in the biotech side that are plant focused. Yeah. So there's actually quite a diversity of what an undergraduate student can get, and we actually specifically decided to leave it that way because I think that is the best way to meet the needs of the students. So my courses that I teach greenhouse and nursery production. I just got through teaching that winter quarter. Our winter quarter ended last week. And traditionally that has focused primarily on ornamentals because that's what in California is mostly the greenhouse industry. But I'm starting to put more in on hydroponics and on vegetable production because we're seeing some growth in that area. I teach a graduate course on modeling horticultural systems, and then this course that I'm going to talk to you about here today called Flower Power. And so it's 3 courses, and if you've kept tabs on my teaching appointment, that is a success for failure if somebody with 25% teaching teaches this much stuff. And indeed, it's been a pretty tough road, and it is a road I'm on because I choose to be on this road. And so I like teaching, and despite the fact that I don't have enough INR for it, I do it, and I would love to say my colleagues tolerate it, but I don't think they do. So let's talk about the course I'm here to talk to you about. This is actually the title of the course, Flower Power, the application of the art and science of the beauty and perfection of flowers. Doesn't that make you want to take the course? I've told people this on airplanes sitting next to me, and they said, "Oh, can I take that course? Do you do an online version?" And so you're seeing the power of marketing right here, right now. Your personal feelings should have somehow just sort of popped up a little bit, saying, "I got to take that." Yeah. And so what I usually tell people is, well, you have to be a student, okay? Preferably an undergraduate student. We don't. Well, anyway. So I want to talk to you about how this course came about, because this was not dictated by any major, by anybody. Nobody said, we need this course taught, could you teach it? This course, I invented this course, and I invented it on the path that I'm going to show you here. So in 2007, I was doing a project for the USDA Foreign Ag Service, and this was a project to do a week-long workshop on flower production in Montenegro. So the first question I have to ask you, do you know where Montenegro is? Do you even know, is that a country or a city? Or unfortunately, some people think it's a continent, but no. Montenegro is a little country in the Balkans, right here where this arrow is pointing. And so as such, it is a place where Americans don't go for the most part. And Europeans go there on vacation, somewhat. It is not a particularly thriving place. And do you know what happened there, say, 20 years ago? Yeah, big war. People butchered each other and killed each other and shot each other up, and people moved around. The former Yugoslavia was disintegrating, had disintegrated. The Serbians were unhappy with the Kosovoans, and the Montenegrins were stuck in between because they're right between the two, sort of. And so this is a place of war. And when I started looking at this in 2007, I found myself being asked to go there. And when I asked, well, why is the USDA doing this? I said, well, we're collaborating with the Department of State because we need to try to get that place to be peaceful. And in order to get the place to be peaceful, we need to boost their capacity in all areas of agriculture, all areas of science. Whatever we can do, the more we can boost it, the more these people will understand that it's better to not be at war than to kill each other over what little they do have. So as I was leaving to fly over there, my wife gave me a book. And this is the book she gave me. And she said, I ought to read this book. And I was thinking, yeah, honey, I don't read books. I don't have time for that. But on the plane, you know, with nothing better to do, okay, sometimes I actually read a book. And so as I opened the book on the plane, I had a bit of a revelation. And in particular, I knew the main characters. So this is actually the very first bit of text in the book, you know, introduction. What's the first thing a person does when you hand them flowers? Bob Lutska, general manager of the San Francisco Flower Market, asked me. I'm thinking, I know Bob, okay? And this is Bob, okay? So, and it's me standing with Bob on one of our student field trips, actually. And so I'm looking at this thing and said, whoa, you know, I'm reading a book, you know, published book, New York Times best-selling book, and I know the character on the page one, okay? And as I keep reading through it, I find more and more characters, you know, that I know. And you can go through. I'm not going to read all this for you, but in my class, this is actually how I open up the class. I tell them exactly what I've just told you, how the class came about, and I actually read them this out loud. Hopefully, then when they go off and have to do their reading, they will already sort of be sucked into this world and will read it. So the book is by Amy Stewart. It's an expose on the flower industry. And you know, fundamentally, between those of us who do floriculture, we've been to all the places she visited as part of her research. We've seen it all. We've seen the Colombians, the Ecuadorians, the Dutch, the Asians, all these things she talks about. And so for me, it's like, oh, this would be a great freshman seminar kind of course where I could, you know, essentially, I can use this book as the course outline. I don't have to do any work to design the thing, you know. And basically, at each chapter that they go through, one chapter per week, I would just show them my slides from visiting those places and the people, and you know, this would be great. Students would love that, you know. So anyway, so I figured it'd be a really easy course to put together, and so on the flight back from Montenegro, I sketched out the entire thing. And when I got back to Davis, I proposed it as a freshman seminar. The administration liked it, and we offered it. And the freshman seminar style course at UC Davis is a 15 max enrollment course. To me, that's kind of like, oh man, do I want to do that much work for 15 students? Well, I said, okay, I'll try it, whatever. Anyway, particularly because I figured I didn't have to do any work, really. I'd just get up there, pull out my slide sets, and you know, step through them and whatever. Anyway, so I arrive at the first day of class, and there are 40 students. Now, this is impossible because this is a conference room type room, which is not in the catalog. Okay, so you actually had to have registered for this to know where the room was. Okay, and only 15 people were actually registered, but 40 were sitting in the room. And I said, well, what the heck are all of you doing here? 25 of you are in the wrong room. And I said, no, I'm on the waiting list. I said, I don't have a waiting list. Oh yeah, there's a waiting list. And indeed, there were 10 people on the waiting list. So these 10 people on the waiting list were waiting for people to not take the class, okay? People to drop so they could slide in. And the rest were waiting to get on the waiting list. This was a sign of things to come, because I can tell you this course has done some really weird things that I've never seen any other course do. So the first thing I did after I taught as a freshman seminar, I decided, well, this has nothing to do with freshmen. This doesn't need to be for freshmen only. This could, you know, anybody should be able to take this, anybody that has an interest in flowers. And so I turned it into a special topics course, and it quickly filled whatever room I picked. So first time I had a room that took like 50 seats, and 50 students showed up. Next time I took a classroom that had 128 seats, 128 students showed up. So it filled the capacity of every room I tried. And it's basically a course that's specifically designed to give students what they want. And on account of that, it has word of mouth appeal in addition to having this flower appeal. Okay? And the key that I was trying to do with this course is construct a course in such a way that it would give students the things they need at the time when they're registering, because that's when they're signing up for courses. And one thing that a lot of students need, they need a small few units to fill out a schedule, okay? And they don't want this filler to be some heavy-duty organic chemistry course, okay? In fact, they want the exact opposite of an organic chemistry course, okay? Which, by the way, in case you didn't notice this, is probably why horticulture students come to horticulture, because they figure they can get away from some of these other courses that are a little difficult. They want an interesting material, no stress. They want it to be useful, and as such, they prefer it to have pass, no pass grading. I also learned that many of them would have liked to have this course be general ed, but general ed is a lot of work. Okay, that means I got to grade papers and do writing, and I said, let's try it without that, see if we get enough people. And they want it as a compact place in the schedule, late afternoon. This is now a filler for their schedule. It needs to come at a time, not in the mornings when all these other courses are conflicting with each other, but late in the afternoon. So I built this exactly to that specification. And that's what the course is today. And I have absolutely no problem with this being a filler, because to me, as long as they're paying their registration and the money somehow trickles down to where it needs to go, I get paid either way, whether the student is in my major or not, or whether it's a heavy-duty science course or not. It makes no difference from the standpoint and you know, it's up to the student. If they don't want to take it, they don't have to take it. This is not required in any major. It is accessible to any major. And actually, it has science content, so in many majors, it counts for the science in that major. So it's now a regular UC Davis course. It's called Plant Science 6, that is our designated number. It is designed as a survey of floriculture, 2 units, pass, no pass. It runs 10 weeks, 1 late afternoon meeting per week, usually Tuesday afternoons in the most comfortable lecture hall I can find. Has to have nice padded seats, has to be comfortable. It has to be the kind of thing where on Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, when they come in, they sit down and they I'm here. So with that, this is a destination. It's a destination during the week, and I can tell you the students come. So I also do just a little bit of testing with the multiple choice questions. They're not difficult exams. And because it's pass, no pass, they are, they can usually pass without doing a lot. So spring 2013, enrollment was 170. And then that classroom became too full. I decided, well, let's go for a bigger room. I found another lecture hall had 369 seats, and last year I had 300 students. Currently enrollment is at 360, 9 more probably by now, and it will have a waiting list. And this waiting list will probably be 40 students long. In the course of spring, the first few days of spring quarter, I will lose probably 50 of these students, okay? Because it's by design. It's a filler in their schedule. They have something there. A lot of students park something there because they can't find something else, okay? So this is parked there. Now, some students end up with it there, particularly after the first day of lecture, but a lot of students drop it because they need something else. They got to do their major stuff. But if I have a fairly long waiting list, it'll all still shuffle in, and then I end up with a class that's nearly full. I'm expecting 2015 my enrollment to be about 350 at the end. It's probably what it's going to settle down for. So clearly the undergraduate students are interested in floriculture. And this was actually a bit of a revelation, because up until this point, everybody that I ever talked to about floriculture said, oh, this is a minor niche thing. Students aren't interested in this. Students don't care about this field. And anyway, we were wrong. So I'll tell you some of the various facets that are embedded into this course. It's, I talk about how flowers are produced, how the florist gets them, the whole wholesale side of the picture. I teach them some common names of flowers. The whole idea being is that if they're going to go into a flower shop and buy flowers, they got to know what they're buying. Okay, it's like if they're going to go buy a CD, they need to know the bands. okay? And they need to know them by their used names, not by their Latin names. So I give them the Latin names also sometimes, but I'm primarily interested in learning the common names. And then how to handle them. You know, we know a lot about post-harvest handling, and a lot of that, they get a lecture on how to do the post-harvest handling. They get some facets of the science about genetically modified organisms, about botany, plant biology, horticulture, and floriculture. But that's kind of a toned down part. It's woven enough into it to hopefully generate some interest among them. So some of them might actually take our other plant science courses. And then, of course, the reading and discussion is centered around the book Flower Confidential. And so indeed, I do exactly as what I initially planned. I do a lot of various things that, seem fluffy, Trust me, it's fluffy. Fluffy by design, It's like a great donut, It's like, don't tell me you don't like great donuts, It's like, it's fluff. We have art in there. I mean, art, after all, is in the title, okay? Oh, I forgot to tell you is, when I tried to get that title through the courses committee, they said, no, you can't have that title. That title is too long. Here's the title of this book. This is Flowers and Their Uses. Okay. Thank God for word of mouth, that I don't have to count on somebody actually looking in the catalog to be marketed my course to. Okay. Anyway, so I use this title. I always use this title. And anyway, it has art in the title. And so the students do an art project. And in fact, these are some of the examples. We have them do a little panel with a letter of their choice. Initially, they had to use the first letter of their last name. But they then have to find a flower, look it up, find out what it actually looks like, and give me some art, some original art. And they have to do it in this particular format, because I have other uses for this particular art. Because as you see, I have letters. I can spell interesting things with what they give me. So this is one of the projects. And there's always a few people who just can't be bothered to do it. They did that in second grade. And that seems like second grade stuff. But OK. We do a flower arranging workshop. Actually, last year we did 9 separate workshops during one particular week instead of that week's lecture. So we did, actually, me and my staff, we did as much work that entire week, as the entire rest of the quarter combined. So I'd love to say I'm never doing that again, but I am going to do it one more time this year, and you'll see in a few minutes why. Students actually love it, okay? And and you might think, come on, there's a whole bunch of guys who aren't going to get into this. Not so, okay? Everybody gets into it, and actually quite interesting, this particular person right here, you might not be able to tell, but this person is blind. How do you deal with a student with that kind of a disability in a course like this? Well, guess what? It's about flowers. And these flowers to a blind person are just as potent as to a seeing person. It's just they sense something different, okay? So her bouquet was going to be, she wasn't going to put stuff in it that doesn't have scent. Right? She's going to, anyway. So I learned a bunch of things from this student. I was really happy this student came on board because I had no clue how I would teach this material to a blind person. So it was actually, I may have learned more from watching her learn the material than I would have thought. Then in one lecture, I give every student a flowering potted plant. This happens about the 3rd week of the quarter. And the student is given this plant with the instruction that they have to make some impact with it. And the first question that usually comes back is, can I make impact on myself? And what I usually say to this, well, you're going to have a writing assignment where you have to describe what impact you made with it. And if you want to write about how it made an impact on you, that's fine, but I would caution you that that might be a little bit more difficult than giving it to your mother and your mother being just exuberant about it or something like that. So anyway, they have to do a writing assignment. It's an essay. It's not a particularly long thing, but there have been some very memorable essays. Particularly, I still recall one young Asian student who took a white chrysanthemum to her mother and nearly got thrown out of the family for doing so. If you don't know why, then you don't know, then you need to come take the course. Because you see, in the Asian culture, you need to understand what a white chrysanthemum represents, and it has a much more strong representation in Asian culture than these meanings of flowers have in our culture. And this young lady should have known better, but somehow in her upbringing that wasn't imprinted on her. But her mother, who was Chinese, was very much imprinted and had been ill, and now getting this white flower, which was supposed to pep her up. Well, in that culture, the white chrysanthemum is a funeral flower. Okay, so not good. But these are the kinds of essays I'm getting. You know, at least some percentage are like that. So we discussed some very difficult dilemmas. When a friend has a birthday, are flowers worth more than balloons or chocolates? Is it okay to bribe somebody with flowers? Now, you might want to think about this yourself. Think about it. Do you think it's okay if you want something good to happen to give somebody flowers? Is it okay to do that, but it's not okay to give them money? It's not okay to give them a bottle of wine or something. With flowers, you can get away with things that you can't get with any other thing. It's a power tool of extraordinary proportions. It indeed, this is why the course is called Flower Power, because flowers, in fact, have a power that nothing else around us has. And so students learn this. And then, of course, I try to get in and get them to think a little bit more than just the flower itself, but looking at, you know, colors and patterns and depth and you know, pot mums versus orchids and things like that. So trying to give them a sense of value with respect to the flowers. And I was actually making a presentation about this course to the board of the American Floral Endowment. And I was explaining to them one thing that these students had told me, and one thing that I learned from them is that they would buy flowers if they had a way to buy them. But in Davis, the campus is like its own little city. There are no flower shops on campus. If the student wants to get flowers, they've got to go to one of the grocery stores or to one of the big box stores, and there they can get them. But to do that, they got to take a bus to get there. Or they're going on their bicycles. Are they going to be lugging flowers on their bicycles? You see what kind of extraordinary length a student needs to go through to do this. Whereas for, you know, if you're going to your friends, those of you who are not students, if you're a working adult and you're going to visit some friends, you'd have no trouble finding flowers. You'd pick them up on the way there, right? Well, in the hands of for these students, they have a difficult time with this because they don't have good access. And on top of that, it's not being marketed to them at all, largely because the floriculture industry doesn't see that they're there. They don't see them as a force in the marketplace, so they don't see it as something that should be cultured and built up. So basically, what I learned is that the floriculture industry is simply not doing a particularly good job to get flowers into the hands of students. And everybody that I've talked to on the industry side would tell me they're not going to buy flowers. They're not buyers of flowers. So anyway, one thing that I figured is I have this very large group, 300 some students. I can do some surveys. And so now, and they're from all cross-sections of society. Now, okay, maybe not all cross-sections of societies. These are students who are in college, probably going into a particular array, into particular lives where they will have maybe an above average income. Is this a clientele you want to develop or not in floriculture? Remember, flowers are luxury objects. So anyway, the Floral Endowment was very interested in seeing data on this. So they've actually funded a project for me to ask these students. And they get the money into my hands literally the day before spring quarter started last quarter. So last quarter, I wove a bunch of surveys already into it. And then this spring quarter, starting basically in 2 weeks, I'm going to do the project sort of full blast and hit the students with targeted questions. Because I can ask them about consumer preferences, and hopefully we can learn how the flower industry can unlock this market. So for the surveys, I have actually a very interesting tool already. When I take attendance, the students have to come with a Scantron form. I don't know if you have Scantron machines here at Cornell. For us, UC Davis maintains a set of Scantron machines, which are machines that you can grade multiple choice testing with. Okay, the students have to have a Scantron form to run through the Scantron machine, and they cost like a quarter each or a dime or something like that. They're very cheap. But because I do use those for attendance already, the student is already using them. And I have 100 slots where I could ask questions on them. So as long as I can form my question in the form of a multiple choice or true-false question, I can ask any question I want. Now you might think that that's not true. I mean, think about some questions that in a typical survey you cannot ask. Are you gay? Are you rich? Are you poor? How would you ask a question like that in a conventional survey? I can ask these questions. Okay. I just have to phrase them cleverly, and I have to give the students the choice to opt out so they don't fill out the question. And indeed, all these questions that are not point-generating questions, the students know which questions generate points and which ones don't. But when I make the survey, at the very beginning of the quarter, I have already told them that this is nationally funded research. They are part of a nationally funded project to help college students have better access to flowers. So they have another motivation to answer the questions. And they know that I'm not going to be saying much about it, but each of the forms has their student ID number on them. So week after week, I can link all the surveys. So I have the most incredible database of information. And I only have to ask the gender question once. I only have to ask the age question once. Because my database, I just keep adding more tables in, and I can link across these tables. And because otherwise, if they don't turn the form in, they don't get their attendance points. They're pretty much captive. They pretty much have to turn the piece of paper in. How they mark is a different story. But if you've ever done any surveys, that's half the battle, is getting the form back. Half the battle is having them actually look at the thing, make a decision. But in this case, we got the vast majority of people answering the questions. And so we had some consumer preference testing on pot roses, on orchids. This was actually an example of how the survey was being run. This is actually in the classroom. We had 2 more stations like this in other adjacent buildings, because with 300 some students, to have them walk around a table like this, that can take a half an hour. So we sent them out to lots of different places. And then on this particular day, when they do this, they also get the potted plant. Okay, and the potted plants end up in their hands to make flower impact with. So we get in this case, we got 2/3 of these flowers donated. 1/3 we grew ourselves. In fact, I grew them in my greenhouse production class. And then the students had to actually pony up some cash. They had to make a donation. If they were going to get a pot rose, they had to make a $2 donation. If they had an orchid, they had to get a $5 donation. And if they weren't willing to make a donation, they could take one of the free mums that I had grown, which are pretty nice looking plants also. So, and then in the flower arranging, we do some consumer preference there also. We had the vases donated by somebody, and then we said, well, we can do a preference testing on that to see what students prefer there. And so we have, 18 different vases. Students can show preference. We have different flowers that flower growers donated to this cause, which will, of course, first we do the survey, then the students can grab flowers and make arrangements. We also tried to analyze the individual bouquets to see if we could characterize bouquets. We haven't quite finished with doing that, and I'm not sure that this is really going to work as yet. But basically, each student has a number in a particular workshop. You can actually see the part of Lindsay's name there, and you can see some other names there. I should have blotted those out, I suppose. But the different bouquets are made by the different participants. They're photographed and then set out, and then the students go with their Scantron form and give us their preferences. And you might think that that would be an obvious thing, but students have special kinds of needs when they're in a dorm room. In a dorm room, there isn't a lot of room. Okay, so a big bouquet is not necessarily the most preferred thing. You're looking for some very special features that will make it work. Okay, and so this is the kind of thing we're trying to tease out here to try to get student preferences. And the company that donated the plants for this is generally very happy with the outcome because they've kind of seen what they need to do. Here's a few survey results. I'm not going to tell you the whole story here. I'll just give you maybe 2 results. This is the population. You can see this actually represents then the population of my Plant Science 6 class. So yes, indeed, more women than men. But okay, 17% men. And then in age, we have a fairly young demographic. This is something that we're going to slice and dice a little different next year. I didn't realize I had so many in that 18 to 20 category. I thought there were going to be fewer in that. And then in terms of school year, I have as many, basically the same amount of any class out there. So it's wildly appealing at all levels. And in terms of consumer preference, this is one example. This particular orchid, the students are given the question, in terms of the 5 responses they can make. This plant is awesome, very attractive. This plant is good. I like it. I found it more attractive than average, et cetera, et cetera. The last one, this plant is not attractive. And you can see this particular situation here. If I look at a different variety that's this, you can see that the pattern is quite different. So this particular demographic has a very particular thing they like better. Okay, why that is, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But to the company that has these orchids going out, that can make a big difference what they send to Davis. Here's one question that we asked. Regarding access to flowers, please mark all that you consider to be correct statements. Students generally do not buy flowers. It's something this group would not do even if they had better access to floral products. 18% agreed with that. Students do buy flowers, but not many due to various reasons, including access and perceived costs. 81 answered that. You'll notice this doesn't add to 100 because they could actually choose multiple of these as things they agreed with. Students would buy significantly more floral products if they experienced marketing similar to what they see for candy, music, clothes, cosmetics, toys, etc. 40%. I think for the industry, this is very potent information. They're not doing it right now. Anybody who says they're doing it is simply not understanding that they're not doing it. They're not targeting this demographic at all. And they could sell many more flowers into this demographic. And then none of the above are correct statements about students, and you see very few people would not pick one of those as being something they would mark. Here's another one. If we open a flower shop on campus run by students, which of the following would be most likely to be profitable? Now I should sell this information. Clearly, I should sell this information. I'm giving it away in typical university professor style. So anyway, if you want to start a flower shop at Cornell, here's your business model. So, and notice the last one. None of the above. Selling floral products to students would not be profitable. These are the people who would actually buy it. And of course, by the time this question was asked, they had learned how to make impact with their flower. So this may have been biased by the course itself for these. So one of the things that I have to do differently next year, I have to give a pre-survey very early on and then have them come back and do this again at the end to see how their minds change. So we now have lots of information like this, and we're going to collect more of it. So let me just summarize then with respect to this Flower Power course. Really, floriculture information has very broad appeal amongst college students, and it's generally much more than we would think. And it's been a big surprise to me. In fact, I keep teasing them that the campus at UC Davis is currently building a 600-seat classroom, and I think I'm going to be signing up for that one. We'll see where my power runs out, but it hasn't run out yet. So it's a very popular course, and I think it's that way because I really aim it at the needs of the students. I'm not focused on my needs. It's easy for me to do the way I'm doing it, and I like that. That certainly is fun, but it is a boatload of work, particularly with all those plants flowing through people's hands, all those flowers, all those floral products. It's a massive amount of work. If I didn't have TAs, I couldn't do it. And I'm grateful for the TAs that I have. And then, you know, the fact that the students are telling us things that are useful. And I don't do a lot of advertising, but I do some. This is one of the ads. This finds its way onto little bulletin boards outside certain faculty members' office doors, strategically placed around the campus. I've plastered it at the dining comments on the glass, inside the glass door as they walk in. And the students look at it, and it's sort of a universal appeal, and then once they realize what it says, learn to speak the language of flowers. It's another potent term. Anyway, so I did initially think that this course would channel students into our majors. I don't think that's happened. Not even close. I grabbed essentially student FTE, student credit hours that we were not catching in any other way, and we're never going to see again in another plant science course. But we got them, and hopefully trained them how to use flowers. With the financial problems we're having, many of our lower enrollment courses are being canceled, so the students are desperate for alternatives, and this is filling such a void. They need things they can put in their schedule. And I'd be surprised if that sort of thing is not happening here as well. Anyway, with that, that's the material I wanted to present to you today, and I'm open to questions.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.